You ever notice how sometimes like one specific moment can kind of unlock a bigger story?
Oh, absolutely. Like looking through a keyhole. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're doing today. We're looking at Donald Trump turning up at UFC 314. Seems simple, right? But there's more to it.
Yeah, you pointed out this piece from The Independent, and it really struck me how this one event, him just showing up in Florida, can maybe tell us quite a bit about the political mood right now.
And how narratives get shaped.
Totally. It's a really interesting little snapshot.
So let's paint the picture. Big UFC fight night, Casilla Center, packed, lots of energy.
Hmm.
And then Trump arrives. The article said the crowd reaction was, well, noticeable. Cheers, people waving Metier caps, the whole deal.
Right. And then he commented on it later, didn't he? Gave his interpretation.
He did. He's quoted saying, it says, we're doing a good job. If we weren't doing a good job, we'd get the opposite. Pretty straightforward.
Very direct. He's basically saying, look at the cheers. That proves my policies are working, which is, a bold claim to make just based on that.
Especially when you consider the timing,
Yeah.
right? Which the article gets into. This wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. The article specifically points out his administration was facing intense scrutiny around then.
Over those import tariffs.
Exactly. The highest in apparently over 100 years, which, just to be clear, those are taxes on stuff coming into the country. They can cause ripples.
Big ripples, potentially. And it wasn't just domestic criticism, was it?
No, the piece mentions the EU, for example. They called the tariffs a major blow to the global economy.
Okay, so you've got this contrast. Enthusiastic crowd inside the arena, but outside there are these serious economic questions and international pushback.
Precisely. It really sets up this tension. Which story is the dominant one, the cheers or the criticism?
And the article also reminds us this wasn't the only thing going on since he'd been back in office. It mentions nearly 3 months in, other things were happening too.
Right, like that big push led by Elon Musk to
Right.
sort of shrink the government.
Yeah, cutting jobs, spending, that's a major policy direction.
Huge. And always controversial,
Yeah.
Big philosophical debates about the size of government tied up in that.
Then there was the attempt, an unsuccessful one, the article notes, to end the Russia-Ukraine war.
Which is just massively
Uh-huh.
complex. Trying to broker peace there, I mean, that's a monumental task for anyone.
Absolutely. And then we're back to the tariffs again, hitting various countries, even allies, the article says. That's a pretty assertive trade stance.
It is. And what's interesting, something you might find noteworthy, is the article points out the criticism wasn't just coming from, like, Democrats.
Oh.
Yeah, it mentions even some of his own supporters were raising concerns about some of these policies.
Okay, so not monolithic support, even within his base, on these specific issues.
Seems like it. Which, reflects the complexity of real-world politics. People can support a figure overall but disagree on specifics.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears slightly back to the event itself. Because it was a UFC night. Fights happened.
Ah, yes. Actual fighting. The article gives a bit of a rundown.
Yeah, Alexander Volkanovski reclaiming his featherweight title, that was big.
Uh-huh. Beat Diego Lopes.
And Paddy the Baddy Pimblett got a TKO win over Michael Chandler. Pretty dominant.
Yep. Yara Rodriguez won too against Patricio Pitbull.
And Bryce Mitchell lost to Jean Silva. The article sort of hints at maybe some context there with Mitchell's past comments.
Yeah, it does mention that, which adds maybe another layer to thinking about crowd reactions and fighter personas.
Then there was Dominic Reyes. After his knockout win, he actually went over, acknowledged Trump, took a photo.
Right. That's a very direct intersection of sports and politics right there in the octagon.
It really blurs the lines, doesn't it? And Trump seemed to lean into it, calling the fighters warriors, modern-day warriors.
That kind of language, yeah, it paints a picture, maybe taps into that competitive spirit he identifies with.
And the article makes sure to note, this isn't like a new thing for him. He's a longtime UFC fan.
Oh, yeah. Good friends with Dana White, the UFC president and CEO. So him being there makes sense in that context. It wasn't just a random drop-in.
Kind of like him showing up at that Saudi-backed Live E golf tournament recently, too,
Yeah.
in Miami.
Exactly. It seems like there's a pattern, maybe, of engaging with these big sporting event audiences. It feels deliberate.
And the details of his arrival at UFC 314, they kind of reinforce that, don't they?
I think so. Walking in with Dana White, that embrace with Joe Rogan.
Who's huge, obviously. Podcast host, UFC commentator himself.
Right. It suggests Trump is pretty comfortable in that world among those figures. It's familiar territory.
And the people with him were Pretty high profile, too, not just hangers-on.
No, the article lists them. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., FBI Director Kash Patel.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I mean, that's quite the entourage.
It really is. Having that level of official presence, it suggests the appearance was seen as, well, significant within his administration. Not just a night out watching fights, there was likely a strategic element.
So, okay, let's piece this all together. Trump goes to this high-energy UFC event,
Yeah.
gets a loud, positive reaction from that specific crowd, and he immediately frames that applause, those cheers, as basically a public vote of confidence in his administration's work.
Right. Specifically linking it to doing a good job.
Even while, as we discussed, major policies like those tariffs are facing serious questions and criticism internationally and even from some supporters.
Yes. That's the core tension here, isn't it? He's taking the temperature in one specific, arguably sympathetic room
Yeah.
and presenting it as a general referendum on his performance, despite wider debate.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About like different audiences and how context shapes perception.
Absolutely. How much weight do you give a reaction in a sports arena versus, say, an economic report or diplomatic feedback?
Can you really equate cheers at a fight night with broad public approval of, say, complex trade policy? It feels like a stretch.
It's definitely a question worth asking. The energy, the atmosphere of a live event like that is powerful, but it's fundamentally different from, dissecting policy impacts.
Yeah, it's easy to see the visuals, hear the noise, and just accept the interpretation presented.
Right. But it's crucial to kind of step back and ask, okay, what does this really tell us? Who is this audience? What else is happening outside this building?
What isn't it telling us, maybe?
Exactly. It prompts that critical thinking about how political figures use different stages, different platforms, and how we, as observers, interpret those signals.
So, for everyone listening, maybe the takeaway thought is this. How do you process these kinds of moments? When a political figure gets a big reaction somewhere seemingly non-political, how do you weigh that against other information?
Yeah, how do different environments influence our view of public sentiment? It's not always straightforward, definitely something to chew on.